Good afternoon, Phil Simon from Accord Brokers here again. Today I'm going to do a quick of house insurance. You'll have to have, and that we are finding is an ever-increasing bill. But house insurance is very important. It's very important on a number of levels. With the way insurance is structured now, or house insurance is structured now, the onus is very much on the policyholder to establish the rebuild value. And so rule number one with any house insurance cover is that you must, as accurately as possible, establish the cost to rebuild a house. It's no use just going, oh yeah, well I paid 500 or 800 or whatever for it, so I'll insure it for that, because that may well be, in some cases, an overestimation of the rebuild cost, but in many cases it will be worth a lot more to rebuild. So rule number one, establish what it will cost to rebuild your house. Now you're looking at your policy. So yes, you can just, house insurance is house insurance, but there are differences. I mean, it pays to understand what happens, particularly in the worst case scenario. There are policies which allow for increase in cover in the event of a loss due to natural disaster. There are covers which will replace your house if a claim occurs and there's a total loss, regardless of cost. But there are rules around these, and so it's important that you understand what happens. What happens when you find yourself in a house which is no longer able to be occupied? We see this on TV. People's houses are burned down. Where do they go? What are the provisions within your policy to provide you with rent to pay for alternative accommodation until your house is rebuilt or able to be occupied? And for how long is this paid? Will you get suitable accommodation for the allowance within your policy? So these are things which you should look at when you are insuring your house. Don't just look at two things, the premium and the cover. There is some fine print in there. What happens in the natural disaster? What happens in a total loss? Where will you go if you can't live in the house you've been living in for many years? Can you rent a place for the amount that your policy will allow? Is it covering landscaping? Is it covering retaining walls? How much is allowed for retaining walls in your house? So there are fringe elements within your house insurance that you should be aware of when you're completing the proposal form. And as much as most of us reading house insurance policy documents is probably not the top of our bedtime reading list, or any reading list for that matter, it is important that you look at the document, and I think in particular look at the things that, what it does cover, of course, but what it doesn't cover, and then look at limits that are on covers within the document. So insurance companies put limits on particular things surrounding a house insurance, and it is relatively important to be familiar with those and to have an understanding of where your responsibility finishes and when there's and when it is the insurance company's responsibility. So there'll be a line where they're responsible to here, but you're responsible for there. So insurance for a house is not cheap anymore. As I said, it's becoming an ever-increasing bill, and in some areas it is so expensive. And when it is so expensive, it is very important that when the unthinkable happens, that your insurance company is going to be there and help you to the best of your ability, best of their ability, and to your satisfaction. Because house insurance is no good if it only leaves you with a partly rebuilt house, Or they go, oh, well, we're going to pay the house, but we can't do this bit. Or, I'm sorry, you've got to now rent for 6 months, but our policy only covers you for 3. So there are issues which you need to be well aware of when you're doing your house insurance. So, of course, the easy thing is read your document, or just do it through an advisor who will explain some of these things to you. So you are aware that in the worst case scenario, certain things can happen at claim time that you may not even expect would happen. And of course, if you're a landlord, make sure you've got extension for your tenants. What happens to the rent when they've had a fry up in the kitchen and now you can't rent it for 6 weeks or longer maybe? What happens to the rent? You've still got the mortgage to pay, you've still got insurance to pay, you've still got commitments. And so is your insurance making adequate provisions for the fact that you are a landlord? And of course, for some landlords, even letting their insurance company know it's a rented property is a pretty good place to start. So they can have all the landlord's extensions in place. It may cost a little bit more, but it's worth it, particularly when you're having a claim. So there's my overview, if you like, or quick overview of house insurance. Do it right, get it right, and make sure your sum assured is correct. And if you want to make any appointment to discuss this, we're more than happy to discuss this with you and give you a quote and see if we can help you make sure that your biggest asset is covered correctly. So have a good day, and I hope you're enjoying the week. Thank you.